Right now, I have the pleasure of introducing the next governor of Georgia, Stacey Abrams. Stacey is a leader who has inspired millions of people in Georgia and around the world. A powerful organizer, a skilled attorney, a committed public servant, and transformational thought leader. And I'm just saying, a New York Times best-selling author. In all that Stacey Abrams does, she embodies excellence, integrity, inclusion, and compassion. She's a fierce champion of LGBTQ+ equality. HRC was proud to partner with her organization Fair Fight in 2020 to help ensure all voters across the country were able to register to vote and have their vote be counted. Leader Abrams ultimately helped secure victories for President Biden, Vice President Harris, Senator Warnock, Senator Ossoff in 2020 and in 2021. From voting rights to economic justice, from healthcare access to environmental justice, Stacey is ready to take on the most pressing issues our communities face and to help transform our systems so that they truly serve all of us. It's not an overstatement to say she is quite literally working to save our democracy. And she needs our help. We are so excited to support her campaign to become the next governor of this great state. Let's give a warm Georgia welcome to Stacey Abrams.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Y'all are hard-headed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm working on it, man. So, the time is 1990. I have moved here from Mississippi. My mom and dad, my mother was a librarian in Mississippi, my father was a shipyard worker, but they'd both been called into the United Methodist ministry. My parents have very core beliefs. They raised us with 3 jobs: go to church, go to school, and take care of each other. And they didn't just preach those values, they lived them. We went to church every Sunday, we went to school every day, and we spent every weekend in service. In 1989, when they were called into the ministry, they decided it wasn't enough to answer the call of the Spirit, they had to meet it with the training of the mind. And so my 40-year-old parents were admitted to Emory University to their Masters of Divinity program. Very impressive. Now, mind you, my parents were 40 years old. They had 6 children under the age of 18. They were already working poor and working on permanent poverty, and they decided to go to school instead. So they packed us all up, and we moved from Gulfport, Mississippi to Atlanta, Georgia. We lived in Decatur as my parents went to grad school at Emory. One of the most important decisions my parents made when they moved us here was that they wanted us to understand how our lives intersected with those values they taught us. And so my parents went to school full-time, they worked full-time, and they ministered. And one of the choices they made was which church we were going to attend. Now, I'm a black woman, if you can't see that. I know, it's surprising to some people. And Atlanta does not have a shortage of historically black churches. But my parents did not pick our church based on the racial demography. My parents based their church decision on its service. And there was a church in Midtown, downtown Atlanta, at 5th and Peachtree. It was a United Methodist church that was an aging church, but it was one of the first churches to integrate in Georgia, and it was one of the first churches to create not just a space for a soup kitchen, they created an entire homeless shelter for women and children in the basement of the church. My parents picked that church so my dad could work at the soup kitchen and my mom could work in the homeless shelter. And that was amazing to us. But I tell you this story because my parents are United Methodist ministers from Mississippi. There are connotations embedded in that I am certain you hold. But what my parents taught me at that church when we attended We were in a church where we were absolutely in the minority. It was an older church. It was largely white. We were the only black family that attended. There was a small Salvadoran community, a refugee community that sometimes attended the church and used the upstairs balcony for their services. But we were on Peachtree Street in the late 90s or the late 80s, early 90s. And if you lived in Georgia at that time, if you lived in Atlanta at the time, you know that during a certain part of the year, a larger church down the street would organize itself to march down Peachtree Street saying, "God hates gays." This was an abomination. It was a travesty, and it was a celebration they held without fail every year. Well, the first year it happened, my parents had never seen anything like this. We were from a small community in Mississippi. We went to a different kind of church, and that just didn't happen. And my parents looked at each other, and they looked at this congregation we were a part of, and my parents did what they have always raised us to do. They said, our values have to be lived. And so the next year, when they found out the date of that travesty, my parents had us make signs on poster board. And we stood outside on the steps of St. Mark United Methodist Church saying, "God loves gays, you're welcome here." Now, for those hearing this story, the language I use is not intended to be pejorative. It is intended to be reflective of the moment that we were in, a moment where we had to be assertive in our values and succinct in our promise. We had to state aloud what we believed, and we had to show those who were demonstrating their hate that we would not stand for it. My parents wanted their 6 little black kids to know that we didn't simply say we believed in God's grace, we had to live God's grace. They wanted us to understand that our faith was not a sword to strike others down. It was a shield to protect them, even if it was a shield that simply looked like a poster board sign written in marker and ink. And so in that moment, we did what we could to say what we believed. Just last night, I was at home with my mom. My father has been in the hospital for the last few days, and my mom spends most of the day at the hospital with him and then comes home, and she was exhausted. She was sitting in the bedroom that's technically mine, but I've loaned it to my parents for the last few months. My father and my mother have both been sick, and so they live with me temporarily. I think it's temporary, but we'll talk about that later. But in the moment, my mother was sitting in this chair that I bought to sit in the room with her. And as we sat there talking about my father's diagnosis, as we talked about the plan to bring him home today, a commercial appeared on the screen. And it was a commercial by Butch Miller. This is a man who holds extraordinary power in this state. He is the majority leader in the Georgia State Senate. And in this commercial, he doesn't talk about the failure of our state to serve transgender families. He doesn't talk about the murder of transgender women and men. He doesn't talk about the abominable state of our health care, especially if you have HIV in the state of Georgia. He doesn't talk about housing issues or health care issues. He doesn't promise to do more about education. Instead, he makes a mockery of our young people. He makes a mockery of children in their most vulnerable moments as they are trying to figure out who they are. He laughs at the question of identity, and he scoffs at the notion that we should wrap our arms around one another and tell our children that they belong no matter who they are, no matter where they are. And as I watched this commercial with my mother, I looked at her and she said, "How dare he? How dare he say something like this? How dare he be so mean and spiteful and expect people to select him for more power?" And I'm here tonight to say, how dare they? How dare they believe that this is a place that says that God can hate anyone? How dare they tell us who we are and whose we are and who we can be? I'm here tonight because I intend to be the governor of a state of grace and a state of opportunity and a state of transformation. I'm I'm here tonight because I was raised better than that. I'm here tonight because I try to live every day better than that. I'm here because being an ally is not something you give lip service to. It's something you pour your heart into and your mind into and your voice into and your work into. HRC has done extraordinary work. And what is so remarkable about this organization is how it's connected to the cause of justice across this country. I know that tonight, Joni Madison is here. Morgan spoke earlier, but I also know LaFonza Butler is in the audience tonight. That the work being done by Emily's List and HRC is work that is necessary every single day. And I am certain you all have already discussed the damned opinion or leak thereof. But let's understand what this really is about. They are working their hardest to strip our federal government of any dominion over our rights. Because they know that in the 50 states, they have very successfully divided us into haves and have-nots, humans and maybe-nots, those of us who deserve our rights and those of us who are lucky enough to be here. They believe that they have done enough to secure the future by stripping us of our rights piece by piece, moment by moment. The Shelby decision in 2013 is directly connected to this moment. The decision to evaporate and eviscerate voting rights in the United States of America, that was the beginning of what we see today. We may have had the blip of Obergefell, but do not be confused that that is a permanent decision. Because these are the same people who tried to make certain in 2004 that Georgia outlawed gay marriage in this state. And while we have for a brief shining moment seen progress, they have been working for even longer for regress, and we must stop them at the water's edge, and that is here, and that is now, and that is today. The LGBTQ plus community must know that when these elections happen, not just their rights are on the line, but their lives are on the line. And I was raised to believe that if the least of us is impacted, then all of us is impacted. My parents would tell us, having nothing is not an excuse for doing nothing. Well, not being the target is not an excuse for being silent. We must fight for all. We must work for all. We must stand for all. And in this moment, we are fighting for our survival. I may be cisgender and straight, but I know that I am just at risk. Because when they see me, they see a friend of yours. When they see me, I may not have the questions that others have, but they know that if I get into office, I will have the answers for all of us. They know that the governor of the state of Georgia can use the veto pen and tell hate to take a hike. And they know that I will use that pen again and again, but I will also use the bully pulpit and the platform to declare my love and my affection. That I will say proudly every single day that there is no place for hate in the state of Georgia. That there is no place for division in the state of Georgia. That there is no place for ostracization in the state of Georgia. That we intend to be a state of opportunity. That we intend to be a state of grace. I use that word because grace embodies so much. It is about allowing the fullness of who we are to come into being. This is a diverse state, racially diverse, economically diverse, ideologically diverse. And what HRC stands for, what we must all stand in, is our commitment to protection. Because you see, they wait for us to look away from one another. They wait for us to decide that it's not about us. You see, we'll grant you one option. We'll give you something you ask for, but we will steal it from someone else, and we will try to convince you that those decisions aren't connected. Yes, we will strip voting rights, but we will grant marriage. We will take away the right to make the decision to have an abortion. but we might give you some little piddling decision that helps you think that it's not about you. It's about every one of us. And we are obliged to stand together and fight together and work together and rise together, because they cannot defeat us if we are together. They only defeat us when we decide to divide ourselves, when we decide that immigration is not the conversation we want to have because we've got a nice little paycheck at home. When we decide that our conversations and our fights are ours alone, that's how they divide us. That's how they conquer us. It has always been so. And in 2022, we have to finally learn our lesson. HRC is not called the LGBTQ plus rights campaign. It is called the Human Rights Campaign. I have to believe that that was a conscious decision, because knowing how under attack our rights are, it is insufficient to divide our identities and say that we're going to save ourselves and God help the rest of you. I'm running for governor because I believe in all of us. I believe that we are required to stand together. And I believe that we have to speak aloud our truths. It is an easy thing to celebrate together in a safe space. It is an easy thing to write a check, and you should write another one. It is a comfortable thing to say, I've gotten what I was fighting for, and I'm going to take a rest now. 4 years ago, I stood for governor in this state, and they told me no. It's okay. I've had some time. I had enough time to make sure that in 2020 and 2021, we sent some good people to Washington, D.C. to get some good stuff done. But the thing of it is, our fight is not just in Washington. Our fight is in state capitals. Our fight is going to be led by state legislators and city councilors and mayors and lieutenant governors, secretaries of state, attorneys general, and yes, by good governors across this country. Our fight will be met in the halls of our states, because they're going to do their best to make sure every decision we need is sent to the state level. And the thing of it is, if you look at the maps, they think they've got some really nice red walls. They think they've already won this. This is just about getting the final decision they need to make it so. Because the reality is that if they can overturn Roe v. Wade, if they can overturn the power of the federal government to legislate constitutional rights to privacy, do not believe the liars when they tell you they only intend for it to apply to abortion. Do not believe the lies that say that we're still protected by the 14th Amendment. Ask any black person from the United States of America who happened to live below the Mason-Dixon line for 150 years. We know there are no protections if we don't protect ourselves. We know there are no rights if we don't defend ourselves. And we know there is no future if we don't see each other in ourselves. And so tonight I am here to call on you to reach a little deeper, to work hard a little longer, not to be frightened, but to be furious, not to be enraged alone, but enraged and engaged, not to simply bemoan our fates, but to plot our revenge. Because my vengeance says that we will have more in this country that has been denied to us for too many years, that we will have everything that our human rights declare we should have. My revenge is a revenge of grace, that we will meet evil with love, we will meet meanness and cruelty with love and affection, that we will open our arms wide to those who would punch us for daring to be. And if you will stand with me, if you will work with me, if you will fight with me, HRC, we will win together. We will change Georgia, we will change the South, and we will change America. And that is when the state of grace is finally made real. Thank you so much.